Hello, my friends. Somehow made it this week. Big shout out to my buddy Moon Willis for letting me use his studio and hang out here. We just had a day of playing around, making tracks, having some fun. And he's kindly let me sit here for an hour in his studio and stream. How's everybody doing? What's up? See a bunch of the crew on here. What's happening? Hey, what's going on? Oh, there's John. I'll bring on John right now.
Yo,
what's up?
How you doing, man?
Good. How's it going?
It's good. It's good. I'm glad we were able to get on here. It's been absolutely chaos running around in London trying to find good internet and make time at different time. You know, like 8 p.m. is a weird time to be to be doing stuff sometimes.
You're so committed.
Well, I'm trying. I mean, we missed a few weeks, and last week was just was totally chaotic. For anybody that didn't watch last week, it wasn't saved. Hopefully, just like fingers crossed, knock on some wood, doesn't happen again here. But we lost all of last week because it just kicked me off.
Matt Beckley, I love you. I love you too, Matt Beckley.
Shout out Matt Beckley, man.
Yeah. I got a text from my brother Dennis Koziak. Speaking of, it's my brother's birthday today. I have to text him after this. I can't forget the text. I sent a gift, but I have to text. Oh shit! Yes, I forgot. Dennis sent me a text the other day, like a few days ago, just saying, "Man, it's so great that you guys keep this up every week. Like, I tuned in, and I love that you're doing this every week for the community." And I'm like, "Yeah, man. Like, I don't know. I just love doing it."
Yeah, it's fun, man. It's there are periodic times when I'm like, I'm exhausted. Do we have enough to say? Like, we're going to run out of stuff. And then we always end up just babbling forever and people seem to enjoy it. So let's just keep doing it.
There's really no pressure and it feels good. So anyway, we're here. I was just asked by Nico over breakfast, like, what's the topic for today? I'm like, we never have a topic, but like we rarely have topics. But I was listening to just briefly, like 30 minutes on the way to tennis and back of a podcast with Sam Harris and Judd Apatow. And they touched on Judd Apatow's like a little bit of his creative process. And one of the questions Sam asked is, how do you deal with, giving the right amount of attention to every project that you're saying yes to, in different capacities? Say you're writing one, you're directing one, you're producing one, you're trying to, pitch one that maybe is for a friend or whatever you're working on. I thought that would be a good question for you to answer, because last week we talked about how today was a mix day and I'm in headphones and it's a song I've already done. It's like, well, how do you give everyone, and then I guess I can have my own answer to this question, but I wanted to start off by asking you a question. Say, just how do you know that you're giving everybody the proper attention, and do you give everything the proper attention?
I mean, I feel like those of us that are not perfectionists, but at least like really want to be doing our best work 100% of the time, which is impossible. I never feel like I have the perfect balance or give the right amount of attention to everything. I think I do a decent enough job, obviously, to have a career. And by the way, I do think we should go over a few of the topics we talked about last week, because a couple of people were like, I wanted to hear you guys talk about so we can jump into some of that. But yeah, I think last week it was like I'd done a writing session the day before, so I needed to deliver a song demo, which meant comping vocals and quickly doing enough production so that it felt like a record, but not so much that I was just like spending too much time overcooking a song demo. Not just for my own sake, for, I don't want to spend 3 days on every song demo or something, which I have done in the past. And it's like, I got to, spend a couple of days on a song demo. It's just a waste of time, except when it isn't, when you really need to deliver a finished thing. So figuring out how much time to give it so that people feel excited about the song, but there's still room to play with it. But the artist who has input on the production can then help shape it a little bit. So I was doing that in addition to doing a mix of a song that I had co-written and produced like a year ago, that I had just gotten all the vocal files from there were 8 vocalists on the song. And so I was mixing, but I was also in different studios. So I was on my headphones. There's some focals at the studio that the room sounded pretty good. So I was going between that and my AirPods, and I was delivering, and I was doing notes on a mix for another thing, which I had produced and written, but didn't mix. So the answer to your question is, I feel like, again, we get back to the, like, that's what the skill set is for me anyway. Like, my career has very much been jumping between a lot of things. And for whatever reason, my brain likes that. And I like developing that skill. I like jumping from writing for a few days and being emotional and trying to pull things out of our heart that's uncomfortable, and then just finishing productions and tweaking and doing sonic things the next week. So for me, it's a constant juggle, but that's kind of what's exciting to me. I think that I get really bored if I'm doing the same thing over and over and over in the same way.
Yeah.
I know for you, as we've talked about before, it's, you know, you've done a lot of different things, and then you've really focused and gone really deep on the mixing thing. Not to say you're not changing things and trying things. We talk about this all the time. There's a new plugin, there's a new idea for the mix bus. You're going to change your saturation. You're doing changes all the time, but it's more subtle. And for me, it's like, I like the excitement. I mean, that's why I've gone nomadic. I don't live anywhere. The last 6 months, I've been just bouncing around, and a little bit of that anxiety, a little bit of that stress. I realized many years into my career that that's part of what makes me really enjoy the process. Is it's a little uncomfortable. I think that's where my best work comes from. You know, the biggest hits I've been involved with as a writer, not as a producer, because sometimes people will come to me with finished songs. You know, some of the One Direction stuff was like, just finish the production, and I go into sonic tweaking mode like you and I talk about all the time. But the other side is, when I'm writing with an artist, some of the biggest records, maybe the majority of the stuff that's done really well for me has been like, I don't know what's happening. We're just going to try to figure it out. And I just kind of go, and, you know, sometimes we figure it out. So for me, a little bit of that anxiety and not knowing how to exactly prioritize everything at any given time is actually what's good about the process for me. So
I had a feeling you were going to say that. No, I had a feeling you were going to say that.
It's the stress of it is positive for me.
You know, I very much relate, but on, you know, the doubling down the mix thing for sure. But I love different genres. So, you know, yesterday I worked on two completely different genres, and it was exciting. Today I have the option to, I have to focus in on one. It's kind of why I'm asking the question, because I actually have to lock in next week with an artist for a week. They're flying in from out of town to wrap up what seems like, from the track listing, a 14-song album, and I have to get all of them started this week. So when they show up and the team shows up, we can lock in. So my brain now goes to, well, this is my priority. Like, other things have come in as well. So I have another song from a different artist. I don't know the deadline. Stems just came in today. When am I going to jump on that? If this artist is, you know, wants me to prioritize them, you know, I have that booked. It's now locked out. So if I want to work on something, I have to work on it while they're at the hotel. You know, I have to work on it when I'm not working on that. And that's different for me, you know, and I used to see that with Tony, like, certain sessions would be locked out, and, like, you know, Robin Thicke came through, or Beyonce would come through, and they would come through and book out weeks at a time, or 3 or 4 days, to go in and wrap up whatever he had been working on. But that was a rarity. That wasn't always the case. They might come in for a day. You know, I saw, like, you know, a lot of artists just come in for a day. It's like, that's cool, I can do a whole day. But thinking about a week, what am I going to have to say no to for that week and move on from? Am I best bouncing back to this artist after cleansing the palette with another artist? Like, I think that's kind of what you're getting at, like, staying on top of your game, because you're bouncing from different things, you're gaining perspective. Maybe I'm going to learn something from, you know, a Nashville produced French project that's super musical into this hip hop record that has a sample, but the sample has a sick, you know, bass line that, like, could benefit from some of this musicality. Like, you don't know what you're going to learn from every song. So I imagine that it's best for me to be bouncing around. So this week or next week coming up is going to be difficult for me. So I'm actually curious, like, how I'm going to feel in and out of that. I'll probably be excited. The artists come in, like, you know, the team's going to be here, order some food, hang out. Like, that's going to be cool. So I don't get to do that often, and I'm really pumped about that.
One of the things I will say as a piece of advice, which I need to follow myself, there's a big difference, and I learned this when I was in my mid-20s. I was actually dating a woman at the time who sort of put me onto this. The difference between scheduling your time and being physically present somewhere, and getting your brain to be present somewhere. And what I mean by that is, like, I was doing the thing where I was learning how to be like, cool, I'm going to be at home for dinner at 8:30, but I would show up at 8:15 and I'd still be stressing about the song, and I didn't quite get my stuff done. And then I'm having dinner with my girlfriend at the time, and she's like, your brain is somewhere else. Like, go back to the studio and finish it, and then come back and hang out with me. And she was really sweet about it. And it was a really profound moment for me, which is the ability to finish things, turn them off is much more important even than scheduling sometimes. And so when thinking about, like, if you're about to go in with an artist, whether you're a writer, whether you're a mixer or whatever, I'm someone who juggles a lot of projects. You working with a lot of different artists as a mixer. If you're really about to go in, see if you can clear as much of your plate as possible, so psychologically you can focus. Because if you're really digging in with an artist, you don't want to have a bunch of things on your plate. It's nice for me if I'm like, cool, I got 2 writing sessions, I'm finishing a mix, sending something off to mastering, doing some notes for something else. I got a day where I'm just going to make tracks with a friend of mine. Like, that sort of thing is really easy to bounce around from. But if all of a sudden next week I got 3 days with an artist, I really should get a bunch of things done. So the morning of day 2, I'm with this artist. I'm just locked in with this artist. I'm not like reading a bunch of emails, checking more mix notes, having to tweak a thing. If I can avoid it, if you're actually going to go deep in with somebody, again, whether you're a mixer, but especially if you're a writer, producer, to clear the plates is also really important. So psychologically, you don't have a bunch of other things going on. So I don't know how much that applies to you personally, but I think generally as a piece of advice, that's really important for me.
Ideally, next week will be tennis, working out, and mixing this artist. Like, that's the ideal. And I should say that it's someone I'm excited about working with too. Like, I'm not dreading this. It's a as a mixer, for me, it's rare to sink your teeth into a whole album. A lot of the time, it's a bunch of one-offs or it's an EP. So to get your teeth into an album that people will hear, I mean, the artist is someone of note that, there will be ears on this. That's what we've talked about in a previous episode. That's what gets me going. Like, I like high stakes. Yeah. I like a lot of ears. Yeah. So I know by default there's going to be a lot of ears. So that's going to get me hungry for this. So I just wanted to bring it up because, like, I don't actually know. And when he asked Judd that question, I was like, oh yeah, how does a producer, artist, director of that level, like, the amount, like, I didn't even realize that he made the Cable Guy, like, that guy, and Freaks and Geeks, and like, that just goes so deep to think about, like, my small scale of, like, I work with some big artists, like, you made $1 billion plus grossing projects. That I also thought was a cool thing to mention here too, that, like, he was explaining that they couldn't get anybody to actually make Superbad for is that what it was called? Superbad? No,
there's a movie called Super.
Yeah, that's
with
what
Jonah Hill and Michael Cera.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, I just said it out loud. I was like, that's not the name of the movie. For 7 or 8 years until I forgot the name of the movie. He said that finally came out, and everyone was like, oh, I get your style. And then they went back and made like 6 movies, like, including 40-Year-Old Virgin. Like, all these movies had already been written and passed on by so many people. And I thought that was interesting when it comes to music. It's like, all it took was him continuing, and him and his team continuing to show these people. And then all of a sudden their taste hit. And then there was a huge run. To this day, these are timeless comedies, right? So, we talk a lot about just, finding your people and finding your team and doing what you're doing. Like, that to me was a pretty direct example of, wow, 7 years took to make Superbad, and that movie will, you put that on now, you're going to be cackling all the way through. And it was a taste that had to be developed, found, discovered, and then loved. And I think that was incredible, because that's what we all do. We can't constantly be moving and adapting to what we think is going to be the thing. We have to make the thing that is honest to ourselves. Like, if I could make a box, like a hardware piece of gear, I would want to make authenticity. I would want to create that and sell that as much as possible. But what you recognize is that the authenticity plugin or a box or gear would be nothing. It would actually just be, it would do nothing, because there's nothing that can actually do that except for yourself. And I think that if there's any lesson to be drawn from the failures of 7 or 8 years of trying to sell this movie to it being made and trumping all comedies, in a sense, is do you, like, continuously do you authentically.
It's a really, really good topic. It's important for people to understand that it's actually, I think it's okay to kind of do it however you want to do it, in terms of what your career looks like, what you try to make, how you try to make money. I don't judge anybody for how they do it. The majority of the money made in the music industry is following something that was authentic, and it's like the long tail, right? Like something gets big and then the long tail that's following it. There's just example after example. Just the amount of money that's made from following the thing that really broke through is much bigger than from doing the things that break through. But it's the Kanye quote: "Trend is always late." Like the people that are really pushing, the people that are really making the next era of music taste-wise are doing things when nobody gives them validation, and that's really the fundamental of, I think, what you and I are trying to do, even though we've made lots of things, many notes from A&Rs and things like that are all referencing things that are already out and already successful. And that challenge of how do you try to do something that's personally satisfying that might be different in the face of a whole machine that's trying to make money off of things that they are, sure are most likely at least to make some money. And that's a very tough challenge because the incentives are really there for people to do the thing that's already working. And it's really hard to maintain that. So I don't, working engineers, people that are making a lot of stuff that they don't necessarily love, like I don't begrudge anybody for that. If you get the chance to make things without anybody getting in your way, and you really doing the thing, you having the opportunity to do the things you love, do those things and really explore those things whenever you get the opportunity, even if it's in quiet moments late at night, even if you work a day job and especially if you work a day job and you do the shit for fun, like go be bold and be insane, because nobody's there to tell you it sucks. Like just go be crazy. But it's a really hard thing to do because there's so much incentive to do the things that are already out there.
Man, quick side note. So for Thursday night was my 2-year anniversary with Niku, and we went to a new restaurant. Thank you. We went to a new restaurant called Mansky. It's a tasting menu. It's a new tasting menu spot in LA, and the chef there, he's like works at Michelin star restaurants. He's like as good of a chef as one could want in America. I mean, he's doing like really high level French practiced food with seasonal California cuisine, very, very LA food, like it's all over the place. There was a Thai soup with like, Dover sole or whatever. It was all over the map, and it was incredible. Chef Joe Garcia. So I go to his Instagram, and dude is just shredding on guitar. Like he goes, his Instagram is something like, chef, but like, wannabe musician, guitar player. And the dude shreds. He also like only wears boots, and he's just such a rocker guy too. And if he sees this, like I hope he sees this, because like this is what it's all about to me, right? This man is like the highest level of chef that I could imagine, eating from and watching their career trajectory. And he just wants to be a musician. And like here I am, probably the 27th best mix engineer in the world. Let's put myself in the top 30. I'm gonna go 27. I don't know why. And all I want to do is be a chef.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like 27 best. I was playing tennis this morning, and the French Open just happened, and I was watching most of it because I love Nadal, and he won the French Open again for like the 15th time. And the announcers are so funny. They always refer to the player as like the former this or the present day this, like the former number 1 in the world, the present day 5th in the world. And it's like, get out of here. So I wanted I was serving, and I was like serving for set the 27th best mix engineer. It's like so ridiculous. Anyway,
I think
my head's out.
Collab with the chef.
I mean, the dude shreds. Like, it's just crazy.
Anyway, you might get a good guitar sound, and he can teach you about truffles or something.
My point, yeah. Point being, a lot of people do this out of the pure joy, and along the way, I've been doing this I think for 19 years professionally. I can't wait to get off this live with you to go mix today. Like, I want to be on this live, but I can't fucking wait. Like, I'm so lucky that I get to have that joy about my business, right? And if you can have an ounce of that, that's great, but always do it for the joyful reason. Like, that's going to be the best way to make the most interesting, authentic music that one can make, is to do it for that reason. And if you get lucky, like I've gotten lucky, then great. But I would work on things that I'm excited about the majority of the time, with the people that I'm excited about the majority of the time, for the right reasons. And I it always comes back to that.
I can say with plenty of personal experience that if you trade the pure joy for money, it's almost always a bad trade.
Yes.
And sometimes you take things thinking it's going to be great, and then it's not fun, and you stick to your commitments and it's fine. And, you never know how projects are going to go. But if you're like, you know what, I really hate this, but I'm going to make this music so I can get some money. Again, you got to pay bills. I get it. But if you cannot do that and instead enjoy music,
but to hate it and do it, like, no.
Again,
if you hate it, it's probably not a good record. You probably shouldn't be working on it.
Yeah. They're very tough positions, but to make that trade is almost always, I think every time, has been not worth it for me. But yeah, just that's perhaps the last time. I wanted to talk about something we talked about last week, and Bradley, who takes the show notes, put up show notes for last week's chat, even though there is no video of it. So his show notes are actually pretty fucking great for something that has no video to it. But I did want to talk about something that we got into a little bit last week, which is where sonics are at in terms of saturation. We've talked so much about saturation initially. Early on, and when we were chatting, there was lots of talk about not using compressors very much, using more saturation and limiters and transients and all these different ways. And so there was a lot of saturation. We did a couple of hours on harmonics and saturation. And you and I were talking last week. I think we could just kind of get into it again, because I love this topic.
Yeah.
Listening to records, I think you and I, not that the golden era of like low end and punch and mixing, but a golden era perhaps is about 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago.
Yep.
The hip hop and R&B of that era, especially like some of those Lil Jon, Usher, like Confessions.
Oh God, it's unreal.
Some of that like New York hip hop. There's a lot of amazing mixes that somehow feel more open, and I think are not as like, I don't know the process of them. They're not saturated in the same way. I think they're maybe mixed potentially through some more analog gear, but not like a huge amount of Decapitator and Spectre and T-Rax and like little bits of, again, I don't know exactly where to start this conversation, but I
do. I've been thinking about this a lot in the last couple of days, and I practiced it on my Twitch live after we talked about it. I practiced it last week with the artist and the producer in the room, where we turned off the mix bus and just saw what happened and just turned the speakers up. And it was unreal when you opened up the very minimal mix bus that I have, that is just a clipper, basically getting like 4 to 6 dB of gain, and just turned up the speakers, how much more dangerous the mix and the record sounded, how much more open. It was insane. It was just like the transients were jumping in a good way, like in a very interesting, like the producer's really great, So what I was noticing, and did this again with the producer here yesterday, wrapping up an EP, where, I had sent these mixes. We talked about this one live. I think I can, it's a Doechii record, and Doechii's out, so I can just talk about the artist. It doesn't really matter what the song is necessarily. But, I sent back these mixes, and everyone was feeling them, but the producer wanted to do another pass at the 808 on this one record that I was really hyped on, because it's so grimy. It's the one that I was playing against the Nicki Minaj record that I mentioned last week. That just, the mix was not as good as my mix from 4 years ago or 5 years ago, where I wasn't clipping the mix bus, and I was mixing with headroom, and I wasn't mixing much past. I was going through a phase where I was only doing -10, and like being really specific on that, because it worked with Khalid, it worked with that Talk record, and it's on the radio, and it was a song of the summer, and it was a hit, and it had headroom, and it bumped, and all these things, where I was like really confident that was going to work. it didn't work all the time. People just wanted loud mixes. So I definitely couldn't get away with that for much, but I had a little bit of an ego around it. So I did it. So then being this Doechii record against that, similar arrangement, similar sounds, but this one was like, my new mix was clipping and it sounded small compared to it. Like it hit hard, but had this faux hard hitting where the clipping makes it feel like it's aggressive. But when I put that Nicki Minaj record on, it was just going hard on the floor was shaking at Mike Miller's at the Atmosphere. And there was like the trunk would rattle differently. I just know it. Like my Tesla was going, like it was just objectively a better mix to me in a similar genre. Now it wasn't as energized and as like, there's something really grimy about Doechii versus this Nicki record. Nicki's a little cleaner. She's like a pop rapper. Doechii's a little bit harder in a certain sense. And it's a new artist. You're developing a sound. You're developing a character. Like I wasn't against the clipping. I just thought it was too far. So they wanted to go back and change the 808. So yesterday I had an opportunity to remix the song. And I just started from scratch basically. And I wound up giving myself a shit ton of headroom. I took the clipper off. I took everything off and I just lowered it. And I gave myself a lot of headroom. And, I heard he just basically dropped an 808 on top of my already mixed song. And it just sounded ridiculous. Like it was just an absurd amount of 808. And there's no way that this record would be approved that way. But I heard the distortion that he wanted out of the 808. So instead of just making it louder, I sculpted that distorted character. He also referenced the Baby Keem song he produced in 2019 that he did and what the 808 sounded like and kind of how he got it there. And we talked about this, right? So I figured out how to get that upper harmonic into the 808 by distorting. Like when I came over to your studio that day and I just like turned the clipper on the 808 just to see what kind of upper harmonics can come. But I did it with an exciter and I did it in a multi-band way. So I only hit above, I don't remember, it's like between 200 and 500.
Yeah, the low end's intact.
Whatever. The low end is intact and clean, and I didn't hear any phasing, so I kind of liked it. But I was able to make this record go so hard, taking it from a -7 loud mix to a -10, and the fucking loft up here was shaking, and I was A-Bing with him, and he was like, bro. Like, it's just, there's something about the feeling of when you actually get low end, in an open sense. And what I've really dialed this into is its arrangement, its balances. He called it. He was like, dude, when I come over here and I listen, I don't really have that many notes because you're so good at getting balances. And I was like, that's an interesting comment to make because I've never heard a producer talk about balances, but that's what mixing is. Mixing always was about the balances. My friend Chris Tabron always talked about that. He's like, a great mix, you can tell by balance. Like Tom Elmers is really good at balances. I don't always think he mixes like the most interestingly or the most current in a lot of ways, but his balances are always very cared for and considered. So nothing's fighting for space. So when you listen to those golden ages, we're referring to them records, not everything is loud. The hi-hats sit back a little bit. They're not competing for the vocal space, right? The 808, if there's a sample that also has bass in it, it's filtered up, and the 808's in its own pocket. Listen to a lot of Metro Boomin trap records. There's nothing in the 808, right? In that same space. So the 808 gets the beat. So you could turn things down around it, get the 808 loud. I'm sure like Alex Toomey can talk about this on working on some of his stuff, right? Like when you can turn things down so the 808 can come up, right? So when he sent me this stem and he was just like, yo, I want the 808 to be more like that. Well, the only way to do that is to turn everything down. And then I turned my speaker volume up and I had him in the room and you're going back and forth on things and just getting that saturation in the right place. You're not getting it on your mix bus. You know what I mean? You're not getting it. We always talk about this, getting things all, heavy handed in one place. So in order to make up gain now, I'm not doing it all with one clipper plugin. I'm deciding to just do if I'm clip gaining down, remember, I have tubes on my mix bus. So if you're hitting tubes and transformers on your mix bus, you're going to soften sounds, oversaturating them. So I'm very much paying attention to where I hit my tubes so I can hear those transients getting lost or not. So I might come down a substantial amount out of the box into the tubes just to get the right amount of sauce going on, and then I'll make up gain with like a Pro Q3. I'll just turn it up. Sometimes the plugin clips. I hate seeing a plugin red clip, but like if I don't hear it, not against it. but I usually turn up the Pro Q3 now. That's what I'm doing all week until it clips, until it hits that red. And then I go a step down from that. So I'm just getting pure gain with a clean plugin that is doing nothing except for turning up volume. And then I'm letting a clipper, right now I'm using the Fire the Clip clipper, but I'm going to go probably back and forth between the big clipper and the Fire the Clip. I think the big clipper handles low end better because you can, we talked about it, you can clip the low end differently. It's multi-band, threshold dependent clipping. So I might go back to that a bit. But the Fire the Clip, if you're not doing too much with it, actually sounds incredible and keeps everything very intact. It just doesn't handle low end great if you're using it heavy handedly. And it could be because there's a built-in low cut or high pass. As you go more to get more out of it, it has to filter up low end automatically, and it could be encoded in that. I wanted to actually ask Acoustica about that because it sounds like that. When I go back to my couch after I turn it up a little bit, I feel like there's less low end just because. So I'm looking for a sweet spot just around my rant out here. I'm looking for a sweet spot of where the floor of my studio shakes and I get the upper harmonic presence on the 808 on the phone at the same time. Because all of those records that we're talking about have it. Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe has it. Like there are certain records that have that, and my floor in the loft goes crazy. And if my floor is not going crazy, that means there's not enough low end. And the only way that works is when it's sub, like, you know, it's around -10, -9 on LUFS.
Well, it's one of the things I think we're really talking about is what's happened in the last, I don't know how many years, it's just increasingly over time, is that mixers have started to focus more on loudness than they used to. I think, you know, trying to basically deliver things that compete with a mastered record. And in my mind, you know, we've talked about mastering a bit before, and I'm going to have a mastering engineer on at some point, either Dale or somebody else. I like the idea of not mixing so loud, keeping it open, and then letting a mastering engineer figure out how to get the right amount of loudness, because that's literally what they're supposed to do, is figure out how to make your mix, which is open and big and not as loud, and get it to the place where it makes the most sense without sacrificing. And as much as we would like to think we have all the same skills and a bunch of can get the same gear and that sort of thing, that's why you hire somebody at, you know, several $100s a song to spend, you know, less than an hour probably going in and doing the thing that they do over and over and over tens of thousands of times. It's, you know, the era we're talking about has a big overlap with the quote unquote loudness wars, was pre-streaming, where everybody was trying to get the loudest possible thing out of digital. And so there were records that sounded clipped, but like you said, the clipping, like the digital clip just going above zero, if it's done correctly, is a way to get loudness that doesn't add the harmonic saturation, which is nice a lot of times, but also can soften your sound and you know, reduce the openness of the low end. So the idea of actually just lowering the LUFS, lowering the volume, and not trying to get so much squeezed into the dynamic range, and actually letting your mix be open, I think it might be time for quite a bit more of that. I mean, I love what
I'm going to keep trying it.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't wait for this to drop so I can talk about it again and people can press play on it and we can talk about how it translates to Spotify or Apple Music or Tidal or whatever. Because, you know, it's always a gamble, but the closer you get to what they're outputting it at normalization wise, the better it sounds on the platforms. So, the less work they have to do. Therefore it's then going to do that by default.
There've been a few times where I've been making tracks, like either making it for specific artists or specific projects. I'm just generating a bunch of ideas. And there've been a few times where whatever the flow I have with drum bus, mix bus, lots of little bits of saturation here and there, sometimes I'll just take all of it off and run the drums and everything straight through clean with no bits of Spectre, no T-Rax, no Ozone, none of that stuff. And then just kind of smash it with one or two things in the mix bus. And it's a very different sound. And it's not necessarily better every time, but you know, we talk so much about, okay, do a little bit of subtle this and I'll add a little bit of harmonics this, and then you add a little bit of neutron, you get a little bit of the transy back. And sometimes that's an amazing thing. And I sort of feel like we're getting to a place where I'm hearing it everywhere and I'm just kind of tired of it. Like I want things to just like be more raw. I can't remember the word you used earlier. It's like dangerous or
dangerous.
Yeah, dangerous. Like there's something like just aggressive.
Yeah, because
when
everything's intact, it's almost like your brain can expect what's to come, right?
It's comfortable.
The minute your brain expects something, the less surprising that it's going to be by default, the less dopaminergic it's going to be, right? Like less
dopaminergic, dopamine inducing.
Yeah, exactly.
Good word.
And that's what we all want from an arrangement. So why let we all get so stoked when like there's a switch up in a record, when what's it called? Drake and
Travis.
Yeah. Sicko Mode came out.
Thank you.
My brain. When Sicko Mode came out, it's like, oh shit! Like, who cares about the mix? That switch up is surprising, and then it's deemed new. It's deemed fresh, and not that you can't do that with a limiter. I'm not saying by no means am I saying that a limiter. I'm sure there was a limiter or a clipper on that record, but we're all looking for moments like that, right? And mixers used to help create moments. So that's what I think when I'm mixing, and the only way. So, okay, for example, I can't wait for this song to come out because I can talk about this more interestingly, but the 808 comes in. So it starts out with a sample. It's like a thing. There's bass in the sample, and she's going hard rapping on it. And then it starts out with a hi-hat. The drums enter with a hi-hat and a clap. And then the 808 comes in without a kick. So I thought that was a secondary moment, and the moment was when the kick comes in on the second hook. And you're like, oh, fuck. So producer Cal Banks comes over, and he's like, yo, when the kick hits, that's crazy. But we need the first moment, the first entrance, the first switch up to you when that 808 comes in. I didn't think of it that way. I thought if the 808 just feels like it's there when the kick comes in, it's going to be a crazy moment. It's building, but but we have to do both. And I didn't necessarily think about that. So the only way to do that, because you got to figure out how to get the punch out of the 808. It can't just be sub, right? The punch comes in the upper harmonic. So how do we get that to happen? So then when the kick comes in, it's like, oh, fuck, again. And that's like, we achieved that. The only way to achieve that is with headroom. There's really no way to get all these parts to coexist with that much limiting happening, because the kick is just going to feel like a little poke then. It's going to be like, how are we fighting to get the kick to be heard? It's going to be more EQ'd. It's going to be like less full bandwidth of what that sound choice was, because you're forcing it into a smaller space. That's how you can think about it. I mean, if you want a kick to knock, you can over EQ 1K and that like woody sound, you can get that to knock through perceptually so you could hear it. But if you really want the kick to knock, you need that and the 60 hertz and the 90. You need the whole thing to really knock, like one of those golden age records that we're talking about. Those kicks have length. They're lasting longer, so there's more chance for the ear and the body to feel it and hear it. So anyway, I can't wait to
I like the
have people press play on these things that I pontificate about.
Absolutely, we'll have to come back.
Acting like I know something, or as the 27th best mixer.
I like that. I like that for you.
I like that so much.
I think I posted just a screenshot on my Instagram, but I was listening to this hits playlist that I love on Spotify, which is like all the songs that have it's called 28 years of hits or something like that, and it's all the songs that reach the top 10 on Mediabase on pop radio in the US. So anything on pop radio format that reached the top 10, I just played on shuffle, and it's very interesting, the combination of things. But a song came on talking about bold mix moves, that Desiree song, you gotta be down, you gotta be,
oh my God,
you gotta be why. That so song is so interesting. Go listen to that song if you have time today, and anybody else watching. The first, basically before the first chorus hits, the whole mix is like 2 dB lower. So when that first chorus hits, everything just goes, ugh. And it doesn't, they obviously add more things in the production, but I was just like, whoa.
No, dude, they used to do mix bus automation. The verse was quieter.
I swear
that won't work for Spotify. So nobody does that anymore.
But
because if it doesn't grab your attention on the intro, if it's not hitting a fucking algorithm, no, I'm serious. This is why we don't do that anymore.
I want more. I want more of that. I want to.
I do too.
That boldness is so. It was so dope because I was like, oh, I like this song. It's a vibe. It's a vibe. And then all of a sudden it went. It was so good. And you know, it actually had a sort of a version of that, but although it's not mixed bus, but like it was also came up a few songs later. Was Gives You Hell, Eric Valentine, which I played a small part in as an assistant, as an engineer. But All American Rejects Gives You Hell, produced and mixed and engineered, and you know, credit to Eric Valentine as the record maker. But that song is like, it came on after, I don't know, an new Ariana Grande song, and it came on. It's like, oh, this is not quite as loud, not quite as bright, but and then you listen to it, and then when that first chorus comes in and has this double track bass, it just fucking explodes. And it's like, you know, I don't know how to. I hate to like have the idea in my head that that's not going to work today because it's not going to be as loud, because that
it will work.
The chorus is so huge. And it's big. It's the effect of it, the dynamic effect going to the chorus of Gives You Hell is so much more exciting than almost any other mix. It's crazy.
Let's talk about this. If your song's verse can't hang 0.5 dB or 1 dB lower than the chorus, then your song isn't that good. Then your verse isn't that good.
That's very fair. That's very fair. It's very fair. It's funny. I like that I think about this topic all the time of like, if the song is great, the production is not going to be challenging to figure out. If the song is like an A+, it's going to work in all kinds of ways. The mix is going to work. And not that our job isn't important, because, you know, you want to reach the most people, and you want to, if the chorus is supposed to be big, you get the best producer and players and mixer and mastering engineer to make the chorus feel big. But like an A+ song is just, I mean, you know, some of the weirdest mixes. We've talked about this a bit before, but a song like Hey Ya, which is just a strange mix, that's one of the greatest songs ever, and it sounds amazing.
Ever. The mix is so totally strange. Effective. Who cares about the mix?
But it somehow it just works, and I don't know if that's like some. Yeah,
the mix is actually quite good. It's an interesting mix. It's not a bad mix. It doesn't hurt your ears. It just sounds odd.
It's just odd. And the song is just,
I want to listen to Give You Hell, and I want to listen to Desiree before I jump in on this project today.
Yeah, you absolutely should. The Desiree thing is really funny because I'm listening. I'm on the train. I'm on the tube here in London on the way to the studio. I'm listening to it, and then it's just like, you gotta be. I'm just like, what? Like I literally looked around on the tube like an idiot, and I was like, I was so confused. I thought I'd like hit a button or something. It was really dope. I went back on it.
We're talking again about something I mentioned, you know, a few minutes ago, which is just creating moments. And as a songwriter, as an artist, you're trying to create moments. And then as a producer, you're trying to create more moments in the arrangement. As the mixer, you're trying to preserve those moments and then create even more moments. And what's music? What are songs without specific moments that people can remember and talk about? And you're talking about this one as a sonic thing. You're not talking about, you know, where the tambourine entered in the second half of that hook. I'm sure there's a tambourine in that record. I don't really remember, but I'm sure
a lot of tambourine in that record.
A lot of tambourine in that record. And, you know, that's not what the fans are going to be talking about, but they are going to talk about that lift and that energy. They're going to feel that without knowing why they're feeling it. Our job is to make those moments happen so other people can not talk about it and just dance. And what makes someone dance more than just a turn up moment that's just like unexpected and wow? And how do you do that when everything is the same volume throughout a song?
Yeah.
I just don't understand it. It's counterintuitive. Mixing these days linearly is very counterintuitive to how records were made in the time we're talking. So for us in our you know, mid to late 30s, we're not old by any means, but we've experienced the transition into this in our adulthood with our adult ears. So we know another way. People in their 20s that are making music now don't know the other way. And that's okay. Because I'm not going to fault, you know, they're going to be the future of a lot of sound songwriting and all these things. So I'm not trying to hate on it, but I'm saying this, we know this, so we should talk about it. And we should emphasize that there was another way besides linear loud mixes created with limiters on. So we come back to this theme a lot. And it's just really important to me, and I'm sure it is to you, to express that there are more than one way to make something. There's always more than one way to make anything. And I would argue that there was better sounding records, Hey Ya being one of them, when there was more dynamics in music, and there are more of these moments. There are more of these shouts jumping out at you, and tambourine hits coming out of left field, or a synth that's a bit unhinged and just like played by Prince and left alone too loud when the engineer probably wanted to turn it down, and Prince was like, nah, keep that loud. Like, no questions asked, leave that. And if you put a limiter on and squish a Prince record to -7, that synth can't be that loud. And that's the best way to describe it. Go listen to Prince records, go listen to 1999, and listen to that Prophet come in the chorus. It can't be that loud at -7.
And listen to Desiree You Gotta Be and All American Rejects Gives You Hell.
Yeah.
All amazingly dynamic records. I'm going to go through a couple of questions this week. Mm-hmm. Keegan asked a question which I think about a lot, and I think about having talked about versions of this with you as a producer, sound designer person being creative who then also is mixing sometimes almost always my own stuff, but sometimes other people's stuff as well. Keegan asked, how much are you soloing? It was a sort of longer question, but the idea of soloing in the mix, I tend to solo all the time when I'm producing because I'm like, oh, let me tweak this snare drum. Let me see what this keyboard sounds like. Let me run through a bunch of things and then put it into the mix. And I feel like, having talked to you for these last couple of years, I've started doing less soloing, especially when it comes to arrangement, and then even more when it comes to mixing. Trying to mix, maybe in groups. If it's if it's drums and vocals, and I'm messing with the 808, maybe I bring in some other instruments, but I'm not really doing a lot of soloing, or not as much soloing. Where are you at with that these days? How do you think about that?
There are very few nevers in my process, and one of the nevers is I never mess with a sound while it's soloed by itself, ever. I've never saw Tony do it. I don't solo a sound and EQ or do anything to that sound. The only reason I would solo a sound is to declick it or do some surgery on it, but I would never make any mix decisions soloed. That being said, I solo all the time in groups. Part of my live Twitch mix last week, I think one of the main things that I think I showed is how I listen to different versions of the arrangement in solo modes to hear the song in different ways. Especially when you have the producer and artist in the room, you can showcase like, well, what's the guitar vocal of this? What's the keyboard vocal? And what's the drum and vocal of this? So, on a rap record, for example, I spend a lot of time mixing just the drums and vocal. And what I'm mixing the vocal with the drums in. So the drums are mixed, and then I drop the vocal in before I put a synth in or a keyboard or something a lot of the time. And then I'll mute the drums in that same trap record, and I'll mix the sample to the vocal. And I'll save as, so it's a different thing, so I can, revert back if I fuck it up. But I want to hear the interactions of all these instruments with the vocal. But I'll never make a decision with a soloed instrument. It makes no sense, because mixing is the interaction between instruments and sonic elements, not how they sound on their own.
Yeah, I like that answer. And I would imagine, like you said, if you're doing something like declicking, or you hear some, like, where's that pop coming from? You're obviously going to solo to try to find it, that sort of thing.
Surgery can be done.
I was gonna add to that. It's actually, there's some questions like this that come up on the Discord and sometime in the DMs. I haven't had enough producers on here. I need to have some more producers to have some of these songwriting, producing conversations. Songwriting, producing? Let's go with it.
Yeah, let's go with it.
And one of the questions is about getting stuck on productions. And I find what you just said, listening in different groups, is a great way to figure out what's wrong in a production, what's wrong in an arrangement, is to listen to the vocal against all the mid-range instruments, listen to the vocals and the drums, listen to just the instrumental, listen to everything but the lead vocal, like the TV mixes, as they would call it. Pull out the lead vocal and see how everything's adding up. And you start to, sometimes you'll hear something that's wrong, sometimes you'll hear things that are getting in the way. Sometimes you'll just be like, wow, this sounds so much better without that all that other shit. What do I actually need to put in here? Trying to minimize. I was saying this the other day in a session, that a lot of the way, I think it was yesterday, I was in with an artist finishing a production on a song we did a while back. And she wanted to hear some different synths and some extra things in the chorus. And so I was like, cool, what I'm going to do is just throw a ton of shit at it and then we'll go back and like parse through and just like mute different things and see. So I just went on instinct and made a bunch of like disgusting synth sounds with different chains, and then we kind of went through the chorus with the vocal and the different synths and different combinations, and some of them had bass, and some of them I added an 808 on the bottom. Some had the live bass, some had the full live bass, some had the live bass with all of the low end put out and the synth, and we just kind of went through combinations. And it's a really powerful way to figure out what's working, because in the end, as you were sort of alluding to there, the vocal is the thing that is ultimately the most important, and that's the thing you don't want to get in the way of. You want to complement, you want to carve space for, you want to interact with, call and response, that sort of thing. But you start putting things that get in the way of that, you know, you're often losing, and that's a big way for me to solve that problem.
It's a way to tell a story, right? So the songwriter's telling a story with a lyric, and the production is adding elements, come and go, and kaleidoscopes, whatever we're going for. And the mixer can help continue that story by presenting things in ways that maybe the producer and artist didn't instinctually go for. And a lot of the times with my clientele, that seem to come back for more records, when I'm exposing the things that they almost forgot were there, right? And when I'm doing that, it's because I'm realizing that those are the insecure moments. Those are the things that make that make the song left of center, right? Like, oh, that weird thing. Oh, let's tuck that. No, that shit's cool. Like, what if we reframe this pre-chorus with that weird plucky thing a little bit louder, and the more sustained, safe thing quieter, and all of a sudden the groove element changes. So you get a shift in feel and dimension in the pre-chorus before we go back to whatever that linear feel is in the chorus. And then it makes the linear thing feel, more interesting because we haven't heard it in 8 bars, right? Or 4 bars. So, we've talked about this a lot, but I think about mixing pop music, linear pop music, very scientifically, because it's interesting to me how to make 4-bar loops or 8-bar loops that things just block, enter. No one's fading anymore. Nothing's like turning out, nothing's filtering. It's just
not
like
a performance. It's
out.
not a human playing a thing as much.
Yeah. So how do we create this? Again, it's storytelling. It's creating moments. And I find that soloing or muting, as someone else put in the chat, yeah, sure, you can mute. I don't like to I'm not on a console. I'm not trying to have everything muted. So the song is on, I solo things, hear what's there, and I'll solo things in groups in order to, present it. It sounds counterintuitive to mute, and for some reason, I don't know why. I use mute automation. So if you have mute automation and you mute something that has mute automation, then it unmutes in the thing. So I use solo for that reason. Go ahead and mute if you want. You'd have to bypass your automation though, and that sounds annoying. So I don't know exactly where I was going with that, except for that's my way to express where I think the story should go. And that's why soloing works, because you could hear these elements in their rawest form.
Yeah, it's better than all or nothing. You can sort of see components of the story. I like that a lot. Let's see. We can grab a couple. There's the question. One of the other questions we answered last week, which I thought is worth just getting on again. Casey asked, how many different speakers do you test mixes on? Car, AirPods, other engineers? And I was saying, as part of the conversation we started with a bit, me being running around to different studios. I mean, I have my AirPods. I have my I think the Audio-Technica, the ATM 50s, whatever, the kind of like standard $150. Great headphones I use for tracking. I know them very well. And I have these new Focal something or others. I can't remember what they're called. I put it on the Discord. And so between those three, I can get a pretty good sense of everything except really, I mean, the AirPods have decent low end, but I still don't get the like pushing of the air. That's the hardest thing to get when I don't have a room that I know really well. Fortunately, when I was finishing this one mix and finishing a production last week, and I had a great studio, which also had Focals in it, which sounded pretty good, and I had a pretty good sense. I have my playlist of things that I listen to get a sense of how a studio sounds. So I'm going through a lot of different things, but for someone like you who really has your setup dialed, I think you mentioned you're checking on the phone and maybe the car sometimes.
Car, phone, AirPods.
Yeah.
Not every single time. I mean, I listen to most mixes in the car at some point, but I'm not going to listen to it before I send it. I'm not going to go to my parking lot.
It's not necessary for you at this point.
It's not necessary. AirPods.
Yeah, AirPods are great.
They're great.
They really do sound great.
And that's what a lot of people have. So, you know.
Yeah, I think you're if you have a good actual monitoring setup, which we always talk about is one of the most important things.
Listen
AirPods
quiet.
And make sure it bangs
Listen
on the
quiet.
phone.
You know, you don't want to activate your bad room too much, you know, when you're referencing. Like most people don't have great rooms, you know. I have a decent plus room. You know, I don't have like a properly built studio. It works for me, sounds great, but it sounds better quieter. You know, I like to bump so I can feel the kick, but I'm not making a lot of decisions when I'm loud. I'm listening when I'm loud. I'm feeling it. I'm getting the impact from it. But my choices, my decisions are made at a quieter volume, so I'm not activating the room as much. So you'd want to consider that as more of an important reference than other speakers. And then let's just touch on send it to friends. I mean, I know Dale is going to be mastering this Dochi project, so I'm sending him a stream to listen to before I'm, even showing the producer sometimes, just to see like, what does he hear on fresh ears? Like, am I going too hard? He's like, the kick's saturating a little too much in the hook. Can we like, either lower it or EQ this, like throwing that in. I might send it to my homie Raul, like, yo, what's good on this? Like, you're in this lane a bit more, like what's going on? And, just send it to people.
Getting some trusted friends to listen to your shit is, I mean, I think it's pretty well known, but I think it's also underrated. Like having people you can send stuff to, it's great.
I love sending it to people that I know that they have a good room. I sent Mike Miller's new MB3 XPDs in the Atmosphere, where we're doing Atmos mixes, like his stereo, it sounds great. So like, and I trust his ears. So, yo, how does this feel? Like, anyway, I think that's the most important.
Totally agree. One last question. Wesley asked last week, didn't get to it. Favorite breakfast place in LA and New York?
Destroyer in LA.
Destroyer? I don't know Destroyer. What is it? But I'm not in LA. I have to fly back for it. You gonna take me there?
When you're back, I'll take you there. New York, Bavette probably.
I don't know New York breakfast at all. I just eat pizza constantly when I'm in New York.
Yeah. I would say it used to be Prune, but Prune sadly closed during the pandemic.
My favorite breakfast place in LA, like the good outdoor hangout brunch spot, Square One across from the Scientology building on Fountain, I think is a vibe. I obviously like Lil Dom's a lot. Used to do the weekly brunch there. And then I think actually the most underrated place, and it's probably going to blow it up, but since I'm not in LA, who cares? Breakfast by Salt's-Cure. They have like 12 things on the menu. It's so good. Their pancakes are absurd.
And I went once years ago, and it was really good. I haven't been in so many years.
Super simple. Breakfast by Salt's-Cure on Santa Monica Boulevard is phenomenal. Highly recommend.
Great question.
All right, we made it.
I got to go. It's time to mix.
All right, everybody go listen to Gives You Hell. That chorus goes. I love you, John. See you soon, man.
You too. Bye.
Bye, guys.